So my name is Richie Hands. I am a senior associate and architect at Lamar Johnson Collaborative in Chicago, Illinois. I am also on the AIA Chicago Board of Directors, the ACE Executive Board of Directors for Chicago, and I am the National Chair of Project Pipeline for NOMA. NOMA is the National Organization of Minority Architects, and Project Pipeline is the introduction to architecture all the way through licensure and every step in the way. This presentation that I'm sharing will be really the entire process from beginning to end, largely focused on our summer camps, but also highlighting some of the other programs and curriculum that occur within this pipeline and things that we have found to be successful in keeping students that are introduced to architecture at a young age and keeping them within the pipeline and ultimately getting licensed. So Project Pipeline really started in 2002, 2006 timeframe. It wasn't called Project Pipeline at the time, but it really was sort of a direct goal of NOMA to increase the number of Black and Brown architects within the profession. At the time, only 2% of the licensed professionals were Black or identified as Black. And since that point, it's still the same. So it's really looking at what things can we do to both introduce architecture to students of color, but then also make sure that they, if they're genuinely interested in it, how can they stay focused and within it and have the right resources available to them. So the Project Pipeline Camp was really more formalized in 2012. And at a national scale, we worked with over 15,000 students over the last 20 years or so. So really the pipeline looks like this. In middle school with our summer camps, which are Project Pipeline summer camps, they're anywhere from a 2 to 5 day summer camp experience that looks at various scales of the profession, largely focused on personal, public, and sort of city scale spaces. These camps tend to target middle school students, anywhere from 6th to 8th grade, all the way through high school, depending on the location. And one of the biggest things that we try to do is provide opportunities for students to design, create, share, have opportunities to present, and really look at the profession through a way that doesn't really have any barriers. We want them to look at the profession and a design problem and give us a reason why they're doing it. Are we designing a house and it has a Olympic-sized swimming pool? Great. What's the reason for it? I want to be a Olympic swimmer. Perfect. That's sort of the goals that we want to get out of this is adding on to the design process through the secondary lens of why do we have it and sort of what is driving our decision making. As they continue to age up and continue within the process, depending on the location, we do have design build camps. So it's an actual partnership with a local not-for-profit to build out a space. This has been incredibly successful in the Chicago market with over the last, I want to say, 7-8 years at the time of recording this. And a great opportunity for students that are engaged and have continued to work through Project Pipeline summer camps to continue to stay involved while they're still a little bit too young for some of the other strong feeder programs, such as the ACE Mentor program, which has a heavy emphasis on juniors and seniors within high school and students that are looking to get into architecture, construction, or engineering. After they get through the ACE Mentor program or a similar type of program, feeder program, we want to direct students towards our NOMAS chapters. These are student chapters within all of the universities across the country. I believe we have over 100 NOMAS chapters across the country. And one of the biggest things is that there's opportunities to design, connect with the local chapters and really find ways of networking and staying connected within the profession for internships and everything. As you continue to move on, we have the NOMA Future Faces, which is a scholarship program that teams up students with the LFRT, the Large Firm Roundtable firms, gives them a stipend as well as an opportunity to work full-time over an internship, and then ideally become full-time employees after they graduate. As students graduate and enter the profession and starting to emerge, we want to provide as many resources as possible to get licensed, and finding ways of minimizing the amount of time it takes to start learning about architecture and to get licensed. Right now, it takes about 12 and a half years from your first year in college all the way through getting licensed. So if we're able to reduce that to any short amount of time, that's really kind of the big goal. So we have partnerships with Black Spectacles, Amber Books, Young Architects Forum, etc. And then finally, once you're in the profession, licensed or not, really trying to find strategic partnerships and ways to connect with other organizations such as AIA, ACSA, NAB, NCARB, and finding ways of, after getting licensed, you've technically completed the pipeline, but how do we continue to create opportunities for professionals now to be in positions of leadership? So it's not enough to just increase the number of diverse architects, but really making sure that they're getting opportunities to move up within the profession, but then also start leading firms, running organizations, being lead designers, that sort of thing. So this year, our summer camps really had one of its greatest years ever. We had 29 chapters participate across 31 cities, which was a pretty large increase from the year prior. We had over 1,000 students from the elementary, as young as 5th grade, all the way through high school, and about 630 mentors overall throughout the entire country. One of the big things too is we want to try to find a good balance between mentors and students that is both approachable and sustainable, so that we don't have too few mentors to too many students. We also don't want to have a 1-to-1 ratio where there's just too many mentors. So trying to really find right size and the camps and understand really how can we make this camp as successful as possible, knowing that 100% of these camps are fully done by volunteers and people donating their time to do this. We want to find something that is sustainable and successful and also engaging and interesting to students. Just a handful of photos of some of the camps, some of the activities that are done. Like I mentioned previously, each chapter in camp, we have a standardized curriculum that is used primarily just so that we have a starting point for each chapter, but we really want to allow each chapter to embrace and understand what makes each city unique, because our goal isn't to create sort of this perfect universal architecture, but really architecture that responds to the neighborhoods, cities, and places that these students live in, and really embraces the things that make each city unique, each city and region unique. So Chicago tends to focus on towers, one of our last days, just because we have a fairly handsome skyline, something that it's known for. But really, as we're creating all these things, it has a sense of scale, proportion, and as they build out the entire city, they have this opportunity to really see how a city can be developed and designed. We have, as I mentioned before, we had 29 chapters participating. These are all the camp locations and dates that happened over this year. It's one of those things that we are always looking to expand and continue to add on camps. And right now, our main goal is to try to have each chapter host a camp. Ideally, that's sort of the main goal. And if they're not able to, try to find ways of partnering with other chapters so that they can have sort of a more successful regional camp or a digital camp or a hybrid camp. Another big thing that we really want to focus on is sort of this idea that there's no right or wrong answer to anything, but making sure that students feel empowered to design things, work with professionals, and really see the pipeline in action. Like I said, we work with middle school students with our summer camps, but those middle school students have the opportunities to be mentored by high school students that volunteer to mentor. Those high school students get to see the college students that are going through architecture school. Those college students get to work with young professionals who just graduated or have a handful of years out of in the profession. And then those students get an opportunity, or those young professionals get an opportunity to work with licensed and seasoned professionals who have been around for a long time. So you literally get to see the pipeline in place. This is probably the best example of it. You have every age group, every demographic represented, and all in one place. So you get to see the literal pipeline in progress. So one of the big things too is really understanding what is the impact of project pipeline. How many students are we working with? What's the average camp size? Number of mentors to camps, dates of the camp, the average age, and really want to understand how we can improve this and make it work long term, and find ways of understanding of the how many students start in our project pipeline camps and continue on into the profession, and then try to figure out where are the areas that we can help focus on or adjust as needed to make sure that the pipeline continues to be strong. So in comparison, 2022 was a great year. It had gone up, especially post-pandemic. And now one of the big things too, we have the opportunities to work with all the chapters across the country, have an idea of what they're planning around, and how we can help make sure that all that planning is successful. And then, as you can see, we try to have all of our camps occur around the same time frame, same demographics and general camp size. But you'll see that we had a good number of mentors, a good number of students, a good number of camps that actually went up based off of what was planned. So it was even more successful than we had anticipated. At a national level, we try to provide as many resources as possible for each chapter. The chapters are often and historically have been self-funded or self-organized. So what we've been trying to do is find ways of helping at a national level, and providing resources such as mentor t-shirts, curriculum, background checks for mentors, doing things to bridge the divide between digital and in-person camps, and other things as well. As I briefly touched upon, we have a great partner in General Motors. They offered a $100,000 sponsorship to help bridge the digital divide, trying to find ways of resources to extend Project Pipeline to be beyond just an in-person camp. And from that, we are in the process of finalizing a digital camp experience, something that can be done by student anywhere at any time throughout the year, and kind of have a self-guided tour and opportunities to do Project Pipeline and continue to really hone those skills. This is meant to be something that emulates the in-person camps, but really provides those opportunities for students to kind of learn sort of during an off season, during a break that they may have in school, over a weekend if they're looking for something to do, and make these things unique so that we're reaching out to students that we otherwise wouldn't have a connection to. One of the best things that happened due to the pandemic was that we were forced to sort of pivot and create a digital camp. And from that experience and the lessons learned from that, we were able to create a digital camp that starts to work. And long term, it gives us the opportunities to have a platform to continuously update, add on to, and augment as needed. That can be a unique experience. And really kind of at long term, just want to understand who's going through the camps, what year, how old are they, what's their demographic, how can we continue to provide resources to all the local chapters, and as our mission expands and as our group grows, how do we expand sort of the reach of Project Pipeline? We have a lot of students that are Spanish speaking, so how can we provide the camp in another language? We've also had requests for Farsi as well. Trying to find ways of continuing to expand our network and reach and opportunities, and provide architecture as a career pathway to as many students as possible. Um, that's really one of the biggest goals, is that project pipeline only works if we're able to keep students interested and kind of show it as a viable career path, because they're seeing professionals, they're seeing students, they're seeing people going through this process real time, and are able to see it as a viable career path. Um, and project pipeline is one of the, I think, best examples of a architecture-based curriculum that is able to engage with students who otherwise aren't represented within the profession, provide opportunities, provide sort of the framework to learn new skills, find ways of creative problem solving, and just sort of have fun at the same time, and find architecture as a viable career path. Yeah, it's interesting. So I was involved early on in Chicago camp when they were sort of in the process of revamping it. So at the time, Jason Pugh and Oswaldo Ortega were the president and vice president of the INOMA chapter. And one of their big goals was to make both the chapter as big as possible and really like re-energize it, but also find ways of taking some of the programs that they had and sort of maximizing them. So I was brought on really the first year in my professional career in Chicago, and was tasked with creating the curriculum as well as co-hosting the camp. Um, and sort of being empowered to have some of those decision making skills and be able to sort of be front and present. From that, I really enjoyed the camp and just sort of the experience of working with students and finding ways of engaging and really seeing really how smart a lot of students are. It's something that I knew, but like being able to work with them and see some of these creative solutions and interesting ways of approaching a design problem was really, really fascinating. And I think for me, it's been helpful to sort of, for my own education, but also my own ability to understand the profession, having to explain things and work through process and sort of relay the knowledge that I know or had known at the time and continue to grow upon. Um, that's been sort of the most rewarding thing is really just seeing the creativity and seeing the sort of the things that are exciting to a student who may not have known that this was a career path. That's really the biggest thing. And I think in tandem with ACE as well, working with students who kind of have a pretty strong idea of what they want to do for the rest of their lives once they get in their career, either in construction, engineering, or architecture. But it's sort of like the next process, like it's sort of the next stage of the pipeline, really. And then same, I also ran the internship program when I was at a previous firm, and sort of working with that front end of the pipeline more or less was really the thing that kind of continued to make me remain passionate about just mentorship in general, but also trying to find ways of how can we refine project pipeline, how can we refine ACE, what are the things that I can do better, what are the things that I can help relay information to, how can I better communicate things, how can I inspire someone who may find architecture interesting but maybe not the thing that they want to do, but how can we keep students sort of engaged and find ways of kind of challenging them and asking them to punch up in sort of the most productive way possible. I think a great example of this is and also kind of lowering the bar of entry, or sort of trying to get rid of as many hurdles as we can. So like a great example is we have a sketch exercise that we do during our camps, which is basically looking at if the program is based around a house, we're going to show images of houses, but not like your typical cookie cutter house that like a student or a kid would draw. Typically, but looking at something designed by Frank Gehry or Zaha Hadid, and and both showing them imagery that changes their perception of what a building is or could be, but then also asking them to sketch it in a sort of a quick time frame, like give them about a minute, minute and a half to look at something and draw it down, and try to break the idea that a sketch or a drawing doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one representation, but how can you convey an idea or the big picture? What's the most important thing that needs to be done quickly, and just starting to develop some skills that otherwise may not be developed there. And it's also fun to, as a mentor, to kind of sketch along with them and see, like, okay, if I'm looking at this quickly, what's the big move? What's the thing that if I were relaying this idea to a client, how would I draw it or depict it? How would I go about solving this design problem? So the camp length kind of depends on the chapter's availability and sort of how many people they have available to them. So the larger chapters tend to do longer camps, either over multiple weeks or over the course of multiple days in a single week. And the scale of the programming is really meant to be done in like a single day. If we give the prompt for designing a neighborhood element, we want to make sure that it's something that a group of 3 or 4 students can work on together, kind of work through the design process, start with a bubble diagram, kind of work through what may be needed, what they experience in their own communities, or what they think may be missing in their own communities, what they would like to see, and then have enough time for them to build a physical model, which oddly enough not oddly enough, but it really takes the most amount of time. So we want to make sure that we're giving them ample time to think through a design challenge, but also give them enough time to just practically create a small model that isn't something that they necessarily do every day. It's kind of like working with freshmen, like a freshman studio versus a grad studio. If you're given the same prompt, more often than not, the graduate student can produce more in the same amount of time, just because they've gone through that process of knowing what things, what tools, what tricks, and ways of going about a design prompt that you can do. And there's no right or wrong answer to either one, but it's just more of trying to gauge it based off of time available, and with the understanding that more likely than not, students have never built a model. So we're not looking for a perfect model, but really more a representation of what it may be. Wow, that's a loaded question. um, honestly, that's a great question. I think some of it is continuing to embrace the creativity and the idea, especially in school, the idea that there's no right or wrong answer, but trying to work with a student who may or may not understand kind of where they're at professionally, or like where they're at within the design process, what they may or may not understand, and trying to kind of help guide them to a thing. Um, and I think because we approach Project Pipeline as both an introduction to the profession, but also we want to provide that platform for creativity that um, that is sort of doesn't really have any parameters to it, other than we just want a thing at the end of the day. I think there's something powerful in that you are able to kind of push someone who may not know exactly what the best solution is, or what the perfect architecture is, and there really is no perfect architecture, but kind of looking at it and trying to find ways of, okay, why am I making this decision? What about this is important to me? What are the things that I should focus on, and how can I best convey that idea? I think that's the biggest one. And two, we want to provide opportunities to just be productive in in a position where there's no opportunity to fail. It's like only opportunities to just continue to hone on your skills. And I think it's a thing that requires both the student to sort of get and feel empowered by, but also the the teacher, the professor, to kind of understand of, especially early in the career, is just like this is a work in progress in the purest way. How can we help lead them to the ideas that they're trying to do? I think, I don't know if that answered your question, but I think that's I think that's kind of the biggest thing I would say there.